Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Amanda Kramer, and I am the Alumni Engagement Program Manager at the University of Colorado Boulder's Lead School of Business. Welcome back to our 6th COVID-19 webinar series. These continue to be trying times, and here at CU Boulder, we have gathered our world-renowned faculty and alumni to provide frank and timely insights for life during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today is the 4th of 6 webinars in this COVID-19 related webinar series. To view upcoming webinars, please visit our website at colorado.edu/business/alumni. Click the drop-down arrow and click Attend Online Webinars. For today's webinar, we're so excited to welcome Director of Bands and Associate Professor Dr. Donald McKinney here presenting Making Music During the COVID-19 Pandemic. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, if you have any questions now or during the presentation that you would like to ask Don, please send a question through the Q&A interface. We will monitor questions as they are submitted, and Don will respond to them at the end of the presentation. As a reminder, for optimum audio quality, we have everyone on mute except for myself and our speaker. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please notify us through the chat interface, and one of our support specialists will touch base. Lastly, a link to access the webinar recording will be sent to all registrants tomorrow, along with the survey link and supplemental resources from today's presentation. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce today's speaker. Donald J. McKinney is Director of Bands and Associate Professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. He conducts the CU Wind Symphony, guides the graduate wind conducting program, and oversees the university's comprehensive band program. The CU Wind Symphony has collaborated with numerous artists and composers and most recently performed at the CBDNA Southwestern Division Conference on the CU Boulder campus. Prior to his 2013 appointment at CU Boulder, Dr. McKinney was the Director of Wind Ensembles and Associate Professor at Louisiana State University. While teaching at LSU, the Wind Ensemble was invited to perform for the 2013 CBDNA National Conference in Greensboro, North Carolina. McKinney has held additional faculty positions at Interlochen Arts Academy, and from 2010 to 2015, he was the coordinator of bands for the renowned Interlochen Arts Camp. As a guest director and conductor, he has appeared with the Dallas Wind Symphony, Concordia Santa Fe, Boulder Philharmonic Orchestra, Greater Boulder Youth Orchestra, and numerous honor ensembles. Dr. McKinney holds degrees from Duquesne University, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and a Doctor of Musical Arts in Conducting from the University of Michigan. Welcome, Don, and thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hand the webinar over to you now.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Amanda, for the introduction, and thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon. The piece you just heard as you entered into the webinar today is by French composer Renaud Hahn and entitled Le Bal de Béatrice d'Este. You will have a chance to hear more of this piece later in the presentation. This is one of the pieces that our students have been rehearsing this semester. When I was contacted about presenting today, I have to admit that I had a certain amount of reservation. This has been a difficult and continues to be a difficult time for everyone in the performing arts, but particularly for our CU student musicians. Our students rely on music as part of their identity, and ensemble music making is crucial to their development as musicians. To get us back to music making under safe conditions, it really has been a cross-campus collaboration. While not our normal way of making music, we are still finding a path forward and continuing to make music during a global pandemic. On the first slide here, you can see one of our graduate teaching assistants, Zach Cheever, conducting a small group of musicians in Grusin Recital Hall. During the presentation, I'm going to explain the specifics of what is happening here on stage, but this is just a small glimpse of what music making currently looks like on our campus. Before we begin today, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that the university sits upon land within the territories of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. Further, we at the College of Music acknowledge that 48 contemporary tribal nations are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. Thank you. As we begin today, just a little bit about our program and what we do on the campus here at CU. CU Bands, the program that I oversee, consists of 3 concert bands: Wind Symphony, Symphonic Band, and concert band. For those of you on the call wondering, well, what's a concert band? It's an ensemble of woodwind, brass, and percussion instruments. Our ensembles on occasion also include piano, harp, and double bass. The ensemble that I conduct at CU is the CU Wind Symphony, and I'll be referring to it throughout this course of this presentation. In addition to our 3 concert bands, we also have the Golden Buffalo Marching Band and our Buff Basketball Band. If you've been to a Friday evening stampede on Pearl Street, which is a lot of fun in normal times, a Saturday home football game, or a basketball game, you have definitely heard our students performing. I want to acknowledge my colleagues in the band department, Dr. Matt Dockendorf and Dr. Brandon Steinmetz. They oversee the athletic portion of our program, and we're going to explore the level of work and type of activities that they have been doing with our students during this challenging time. In non-COVID times, our program is incredibly visible to the campus community, and in a given fall semester, there are approximately 400 to 450 students participating in one of our ensembles. This includes music majors and non-majors from across the campus, and we're proud to continue this level of engagement with our students. And I'm really excited to say that our band enrollment numbers have remained relatively stable through a global pandemic. Before the pandemic, we made plans to add a 4th concert band to our program because the numbers were increasing, a campus band for more students to participate in music making. And we're pleased that we were able to move forward with this plan for next semester. I think the level of involvement that we're seeing in the band program speaks to our students and their desire to stay connected with a community of musicians. This has been a primary factor and motivator for our department to create an in-person experience for our students. For me, it's important to tell the story of pandemic music making from the beginning. I think the dates of March 10 to 14 will stay with nearly everyone on this webinar because that is when everything seemed to stop. On the evening of Wednesday, March 11, I was scheduled to give a performance with the CU Wind Symphony in Grusin Recital Hall for our Pendulum New Music series. As we headed into those final rehearsals and getting ready to perform, I heard some murmuring from our students that the performance might not happen. And frankly, this seemed unthinkable to me. I've spent my career preparing groups of student musicians to present performances, and the thought of canceling a performance because of a global pandemic, it's simply not part of my training, nothing I had ever considered. As you can imagine, the performance was canceled after consultation with other faculty members, and it was clear at that time that we would be pivoting to online learning. Our final rehearsal was the next day, Thursday, March 12th, when we gathered as a group for the last time to perform a piece of music together. This was the last time I've conducted the full CU Wind Symphony, an ensemble that typically ranges between 55 and 60 students. The quote that you see here is from a message I sent to the Wind Symphony on the afternoon of Wednesday, March 11, to announce our final rehearsal before we departed. We gathered that afternoon on Thursday, March 12th, performed through a piece of music, handed in our folders and our music that we were in preparation for at that time, and said goodbye for a while. In the spring and summer of 2020, I was contacted by Dr. Mark Speed, who is the director of bands at Clemson University, and he's also the national president of an organization called the College Band Directors National Association, or CBDNA. You heard Amanda refer to that organization earlier in the presentation. Along with the National Federation of High School Associations, they were forming an international coalition of organizations, institutions, and schools to fund a study that would explore how much aerosol is expelled by wind and brass instruments. At the time, this was an almost unknown area of research. We knew that COVID-19 was being spread through the air. In fact, you may have heard about a choir rehearsal in Skagit County, Washington in the early weeks of the pandemic. There were several choir members who were infected after an early March choral rehearsal. At the time, this was strong evidence that COVID-19 could spread during music making. The quote that you see here is the purpose statement for the research study. You'll notice that it mentions aerosol rates for wind instrumentalists, but also the accumulation of aerosols in a space. These are two considerations that we've had to take into account. How much aerosol is expelled, but also how much aerosol could accumulate in a room as we make music. In partnership with CBDNA and NFHS, Dr. Shelley Miller and her colleagues here at the University of Colorado have conducted this very important research that has studied aerosol emission by wind and brass players, as well as theater and dance. In addition, Dr. Miller's research provided guidance about mitigation efforts that enabled performing musicians to gather during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Miller did a presentation last spring for the same webinar series, and I encourage all of you to take a look at it on YouTube and Facebook. It really does have a lot of great information that can help explain where this came from. Preliminary results from this research were distributed on July 13, and a second round of results were announced on August 6th. Now keep in mind, when August 6th came around, this was approximately 3 weeks before we began our fall semester. Participants in what became known as the CU Aerosol Study, how a lot of my colleagues across the country are now referring to it, were primarily CU College of Music students. And I have to commend all of them for their time and energy toward this research study. Through their participation, we have found a small path forward to continue our rehearsals and performance of music. Even though our music making looks very different from non-COVID times, Dr. Miller's research has enabled us to make music during this global pandemic. Her research study has continued throughout the course of this semester. Throughout the course of the summer, along with my colleagues in the CU Band Department, who I've mentioned already, Dr. Matt Dockendorf and Dr. Brandon Steinmetz, we were on the side working for our plans for the fall semester and what it might look like. It's a semester that requires extreme flexibility. I've used that word numerous times with all of my students this semester: flexibility in approach, in sensitivity, being able to pivot at any point to a different style of learning and a different style of teaching for us. We knew at the time in the summer that this semester would be unlike anything we'd ever experienced. Our plans included a working document where we shared ideas and planned for a variety of different scenarios, including in-person, online, and hybrid activities. Our work to plan for the fall included all of our ensembles. So the concert bands that I mentioned earlier, as well as the athletic bands, marching band, basketball band, as we're about to enter into the spring semester. But they were grounded, all of our considerations really were grounded by 3 primary questions that you see on the screen. How do we create an in-person music making experience for our students? How do we create community for our students when we are meeting in small groups? How do we supplement the in-person experience with online activities? As you can see from these questions, we had accepted by midsummer that large ensemble music making would not happen. And by large ensemble, I'm referring to the typical ensemble size that ranges between 55 to 85 students for our concert bands, to the marching band that typically has 230 and beyond students. So we began to strategize repertoire options for our students. What music would we play? As well as how to supplement the learning with a variety of online options. Everything on campus, I believe, and our plans included, had what I would call plan A, B, C, and so on. So we were able to pivot and change our modality and what we were going to offer to the students at any point in the course of the semester. I have to commend my colleagues for their creativity and ingenuity. They really embraced the impossible, and to a certain extent, we have turned it into the possible this semester. As the results were announced from Dr. Shelley Miller's research, we began to think about how would we implement suggestions from the CU Aerosol Study. Now keep in mind, we had some initial results that were very preliminary in July, and then 3 weeks out from the beginning of the semester, we saw a second round of results from the study. and that informed how we would approach and what we would implement to keep our students safe and allow music making to occur during the pandemic. In collaboration with various campus partners from across the campus, we are now mandated to rehearse for a maximum of 30 minutes, after which we must vacate the room for 15 minutes to allow for adequate ventilation to take place. One of the learning curves this semester for us as a department is that we need to account for a few minutes at the beginning of those 30-minute blocks and at the end of the 30-minute blocks. Because as you can imagine, it takes a few minutes for the students to enter the room, unpack their instruments, prepare to play, put together their stands, and then do the same when they go to exit the room. So our 30 minutes really just does get shrunk down to about 25 minutes of actual music making. The next item we implemented is puppy pads for our brass players to release condensation. I've used the word puppy pads, typed it and emailed it many times in the past 6 months, but it's a way for our students to absorb condensation. Some of you on the call may know that condensation accumulates inside of a brass instrument, such as trumpet, trombone, horn, euphonium, and tuba. And at various times as they are playing the instrument, the player needs to release all of that condensation through what is commonly called a spit valve. And if they don't, then you get kind of this muddled, murmuring sound of the condensation rolling through the valves of the instrument. Dr. Miller's research advised that this condensation should not be left on the floor. And that was the typical practice during non-COVID times. The player would release the condensation onto the floor and walk away after the rehearsal, and the condensation would stay there on the floor. And now we've come up with a way of using puppy pads to absorb that condensation. We're also using masks with slits or holes cut into them in the center. The player can insert, the student or the player can insert the mouthpiece into this hole or slit and thereby minimize some additional aerosol that may be dispersed as they're playing the instrument. This has probably been one of the most challenging elements to overcome because it impacts how a student approaches their instrument. In addition to wearing a mask while playing, I also require each student to have a secondary mask to use it to cover the hole or the slit during rests or breaks in the playing. Most of the students have chosen to use the secondary mask hanging off their ear, or they'll keep it underneath of their chin. When we stop, or perhaps they're resting during the rehearsal, during the piece of music, they'll pull up the secondary mask and cover the slit or the hole in the primary mask that they're using. Bell covers are 2-ply covers that each instrument uses to wrap the end of their instrument. Dr. Miller's research found that bell covers can help to mitigate the amount of aerosol that is dispersed while the instrument is being played. This has been quite another challenge for our students to overcome because some of our instruments, such as clarinet and bassoon, they have to move air through the end of the instrument. If that airflow is hindered toward the end of the instrument, some of the notes that are produced down toward the end of the instrument, they will not respond or sound easily. So we've adapted. We've actually are now using 2-ply surgical masks at the end of the clarinet and bassoon to allow the air to spin all the way to the end of the instrument. In addition to the challenges that I just mentioned about response with clarinet and bassoon, bell covers also cause a change in the tone quality and the intonation of the instruments. And I suppose the best way I could describe it to somebody is the sound is muted or muffled, particularly for our brass players. Because if you imagine the end of a tuba, let's say, and you've put a big cover over that bell, that sound is now going to become muffled or really quieter than it normally would without the bell cover. Lastly, the campus has given us a mandate that wind players should maintain 12 feet of distance during our rehearsal. This has proven to create another level of challenge for us, but they're overcoming it, I will say. But it causes a challenge for cohesive ensemble, just getting everybody to sound at the same time when they're spread out in front of you 12 feet apart between each student can be quite a challenge for them. Some additional measures that we also have in place for our students are the COVID-19 saliva monitoring test that some of you may have heard about. I require our wind and brass students to participate in these COVID-19 saliva monitoring tests on a weekly basis. The CU Wind Symphony is also rehearsing in the newly completed expansion of the IMIG Music Building. So we're lucky that the HVA system in the space that I'm rehearsing right now is brand new. All of the spaces in the College of Music were also evaluated to allow for adequate ventilation. This is a typical CU Wind Symphony rehearsal schedule for the fall semester that I send to the students every week to give them a sense of what is going to be coming up and how they need to prepare for the following week. Here you can see that we have 30 minutes of rehearsal time with a 15-minute break between each piece of music. The CU Wind Symphony rehearses Tuesday and Thursday from 12:45 to 3:30. You'll note that we're also fortunate to have access to Grusin Recital Hall, which you saw a picture of earlier, for a portion of our rehearsals. This has enhanced our capacity to engage more students because we can have two pieces with different personnel of students rehearsing at the same time. So on this schedule, you can see that I start at 12:45, allow for that 5-minute in and out time for the students to enter and exit, break for 15 minutes to allow for ventilation, then start again at 1:30, stop at 2, so on and so forth till I get to 3:30. On a normal day, I can then have basically what I call 4 blocks of rehearsal time between 12:45 and 3:30. Now we get to floor plans. This is the floor plan that was provided to us in working with campus partners to outline the number of students that are allowed into our primary rehearsal space, IMIG Music Building S134. The circles that you see in this picture, it's a little convoluted. It's kind of difficult to decipher at first when you look at it, but the circles indicate the circumference around each wind and brass player. And you can see on the right-hand side that I can have a maximum of 17 students plus myself during a rehearsal. I should also mention right now that the 12 feet distance that I keep mentioning only applies to wind and brass players. For string players, anybody that might be interested in string players, they are maintaining an 8 feet distance, and that extends to harp players. You're going to see harps in a video coming up here in a few slides, and you're going to see the harps will be seated 8 feet apart, brass and winds 12 feet apart. These are 2 pictures of what our rehearsals have looked like this semester. On the left, you can see one of our graduate teaching assistants, Zach Cheever, working with an octet of woodwind players in Grusin Recital Hall. On the right, you can see another one of our graduate teaching assistants, Melinda Mason, rehearsing with a brass and woodwind group in S134, the new rehearsal space that I've been mentioning. You also notice in this picture on the right, there are some X squares on the floor that indicate the 4 foot by 4 foot grid that is established on the floor that stays in place. This has made it very easy to establish 8 or 12 feet distance between our students. Before every rehearsal, you will see me or one of my teaching assistants going around the room and making sure that we've left enough X's between each student. And again, it's that extra level of safety that we need to make sure we follow the protocols and have that established before we begin our rehearsals. I want to show a brief video now from a recent CU Wind Symphony rehearsal that demonstrates our protocols in action. This video that you're about to see is from last Thursday, October 29th, and it's going to be another movement from the same piece that you heard earlier at the beginning of the webinar, La Ball de Beatrice d'Est by Ronaldo Hahn. This will be the 6th movement, Courant. You'll see here a couple things that I've mentioned earlier. You'll see the players are spaced 12 feet apart, and notice in the back wall, you'll notice that the harps are sitting 8 feet apart. This is the CU Wind Symphony rehearsing a movement from La Ball de Beatrice d'Est. One of the questions that I mentioned earlier in our planning is how do we create community for our students when we are meeting in small groups? I believe this is an important part of ensemble music making for our students. The opportunity to gather with their peers and feel connected with fellow musicians is an important part of their experience and development as artists. To supplement the in-person rehearsals that we've been doing, we devise weekly community gatherings with artists from various backgrounds and disciplines. Our gatherings have been occurring every Thursday from 2:30 to 3:30, and our meetings have featured guest artists and CU faculty who provide a variety of different perspectives. As we planned these sessions, an important part of these meetings for us was allowing space for our students to hear and learn about issues of racial and social injustice in the arts. In the posters on the right, you can see a sample of the various gatherings that we've had. These include flutist Anthony Triunfo, pianist Laura Downs, soprano Gila Plitman, clarinetist Charles Sonoda from Pershing's own United States Army Band, a gathering of CU alums from the music education program, and our professor of horn, Mike Thornton. These have been a valuable asset to what we've been able to offer to our students this semester because it supplements the in-person experience as well. In addition, the primary focus of this really was giving that sense of community. Even through Zoom, we were able to establish that sense of community and feeling that sense of connection among our students. I also want to spend a few minutes discussing our athletic band program that I mentioned earlier and how my colleagues have adapted their instruction for a marching band of approximately 230 students. That's a challenge. They have done several activities to continue the upward trajectory of this group. There have been virtual community building activities through Zoom, as well as Zoom rehearsals, where the students are able to sing or finger along with recordings of pieces of music. With Zoom, one of the challenges with Zoom and music making is it's not possible to coordinate everyone at the same time because of latency. It's the same thing when you may be on a Zoom call and there's that certain delay back and forth. That latency, it makes it very challenging to do any coordination of music through Zoom. By using recording, the students can finger along as if they were playing their instruments. Students were also able to learn basic marching technique through these Zoom rehearsals. Another aspect of the marching band is that it has a very long and storied history. So they have reserved time for our students to learn about the history of the organization. My colleagues have also led several leadership lessons through Zoom. In the area of in-person rehearsals, the students have been able to meet in small sectionals outside on fair and field. When I say sectionals, I'm referring to students meeting with the same instruments. So imagine all of the clarinets, all of the trombones meeting together socially distanced in groups out on fair and field. Lastly, the highlight of the student experience has been the opportunity to gather as an ensemble in Folsom Field and record various pieces of music. These recordings, I'm very pleased to say this, and some past performances will be included as part of the first home football game tomorrow. I should also note that our marching band students have maintained 12 feet of distance and utilized face masks and bell covers while performing outside. The picture on the right is the marching band rehearsing outside last Friday evening as they recorded material for the opening football game tomorrow. You can particularly see the bell covers in this picture. These rehearsals in Folsom have really been meaningful for our students, and I would offer that a lot of our students have been in the marching band for 3 or 4 years, and this might be the last fall semester that they can be part of this organization. So even though it's not their normal experience in the marching band, that opportunity to gather in Folsom at 12 feet of distance, spread out across the stadium in a certain way, has been really impactful for them. And I would offer that it also has left a lasting impression on them. I just want to extend my congratulations to them, as they've been a really wonderful asset to the organization as it's made its way through these difficult times. I'd like to show a video of the marching band rehearsing in mid-September in Folsom. Already in the video here, you can see that brass and percussion were placed on the field, while the woodwinds were facing them in the stands. Everyone is maintaining 12 feet of distance, and I hope everyone on this call will recognize this important piece of music to CU. Some of you may be wondering what happened when the university pivoted to online learning for 2 weeks in late September and early October. This again comes back to flexibility and approach in terms of learning and also teaching. Here's how I adapted and pivoted to online learning with the Wind Symphony. I offered a performance masterclass through Zoom, where students were able to perform any piece of music for their colleagues and receive feedback. For example, a bassoonist performed for a group of students and then gathered feedback on their performance, both verbal and through the famous Zoom chat. In my conducting seminar this semester, my graduate conducting students have spent the semester exploring and presenting on composers who may be overlooked in our general study, and it is time for us to catch up and learn about these wonderful artists. My graduate teaching assistants presented several sessions on these composers for our Wind Symphony students, and the composers included William Grant Still, Chen Yi, and Florence Price. This was a wonderful experience for our students, but it also provided an opportunity for our graduate teaching assistants to present an online Zoom class. I'm experiencing that feeling right now as I sit here with all of you today. It is a feeling that has lack of connection because you're speaking into the ether in a certain way. So it doesn't have that human connection all the time. And it's something I wanted our graduate students to experience, what it's like to present through Zoom with very limited human interaction that you normally would get in person. Lastly, CU Bands has commissioned a new piece of music with support from one of our wonderful donors, Jan Burton. This piece is written specifically for a COVID-sized ensemble and confronts the challenges of the pandemic as well as issues of racial and social injustice in our country. The piece is called Code Switch Mixtape, and we spent one session meeting with the two composers of the piece, Derek Spiva Jr. and CU alum, Connor Brown. This piece will be premiered next semester by the CU Wind Symphony. When I say COVID-sized ensemble, what I mean by that is we were very particular in giving information to these two composers about what we were looking for and the number of players or students that could participate in the piece, because we knew the capacity in our rehearsal room would be limited. So we needed to make sure that the piece would be performable during the pandemic. We are now finishing out the semester. We're very close. So we are now in the process of recording all of the music that we rehearsed this semester. And the recording process began earlier this week and will continue into next week. All of this captured content will be streamed on Monday, December 7th. We also have 2 remaining community gatherings. Many of you may know that the campus will be moving to online learning on the 16th of November. We will be able to record all of our material next week before we go to online learning. After all of the work and implementation that has taken place in our department for the past 6 months, what matters most to me and my colleagues is the impact and learning that has taken place with our students. I solicited feedback from 2 students in the Wind Symphony, Ariel Flack, a 4th-year flute student in performance and music education, and Jacob Howard, a 2nd-year master's student in trumpet performance. Originally, I was going to edit their comments, but their comments are profound and express the impact our efforts have had on their learning. From Ariel, if you don't mind, I'll read this to you. Making music with my peers has been a powerful experience during this unusual semester. Each member of the ensemble takes on a high level of personal responsibility, which has allowed us to continue rehearsing together. Initially, I was apprehensive about rehearsing in person. Aerosols are one of the major ways COVID-19 is transmitted, scientists say. The Aerosol Study conducted at CU over the summer was a huge part of why I felt safe to return. I am also fortunate to work with musicians who I feel I can trust to take the necessary safety measures to ensure we all stay healthy. Sometimes I still experience stress over the possibility that a College of Music affiliate will contract COVID-19, and that prospect scares me. It's been different to rehearse in a COVID-appropriate seating arrangement with many extra safety precautions, but we've demonstrated resilience as a community. We have taken the university's guidelines in stride and adapted to a most unusual music-making environment because we want to create art together. That last sentence that she speaks there is really quite profound for me because it speaks to that sense of community and sense of identity that I spoke about at the beginning of the presentation, and ultimately something we've been striving to maintain through the pandemic. And this from Jacob. The challenges presented to us this semester have been like no other. This is especially so within the College of Music. The nature of what we do as musicians requires face-to-face interactions in many settings to be most successful. Most of these include ensembles, lessons, coachings, performances, masterclasses, and more. To that end, he, referring to me, has created weekly virtual gatherings where Wind Symphony and other music students can learn from and interact with some of the leading artists in the music industry. He has also created virtual performance opportunities where music students were able to perform live via Zoom for their peers, an opportunity which simply cannot be replaced. In addition, he has worked to shed light on lesser-known composers by having his teaching assistants present to the Wind Symphony members, an experience that gave the TAs a chance to professionally address their peers and provide an opportunity for the members to become more well-rounded in their musical knowledge. Regarding our rehearsals in person, I am very grateful that we have been able to make music live. The College of Music has implemented several steps to create a safe music-making environment for all. These include evenly spaced out seating, condensation pads for brass players, masks with holes to use when playing, use of individual music stands, and bell covers. I want to thank Ariel and Jacob for giving their thoughts so honestly and openly and contributing to the presentation today. One thing that Jacob mentions here at the end is individual music stands. You may have seen in the video earlier that a lot of the students had wire music stands, which we generally don't use. To minimize contact of material this semester, all of the College of Music students are using folding stands of their own. So it minimizes contact and it minimizes the need for us to distribute stands to every musician when they come in the room. Before I take some questions, I do want to acknowledge my colleagues in the CU Bands Department. They, along with everyone in the College of Music, have worked tirelessly for the past 6 months to plan, implement, and make music with our students. Dr. Matt Dockendorf, Associate Director of Bands, Dr. Brandon Steinmetz, Assistant Director of Bands, Laura Graham, our Ensembles Assistant, and graduate teaching assistants, Francisco Borja, Zach Cheever, Melinda Mason, and Derek Stoughton. I also want to thank the College of Music Administration, Dean Robert Shea, and Senior Associate Dean John Davis for their ongoing support and advocacy for our students. I encourage all of you to also follow us on Facebook. We try to stay active through social media, and you can find updates on what we're up to throughout the course of the semester. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don, for this informative presentation. At this time, I invite attendees to submit their questions through the Q&A interface, and we will ask Don as many questions as we can get to. The first question here comes from Becky. Thank you, Don. Your presentation has been so informative. My question is, have you had to modify or change repertoire for study because of fewer students in each ensemble?
Thanks, Amanda, and hi, Becky. Yes, the answer to that question is yes. We definitely had to modify. So all of the repertoire choices that we traditionally would do with a large ensemble, we knew immediately that we would be impacted. So an example is, I know in S134, we remember that floor diagram, that I can have 17 students plus myself. So the number of students when I'm looking at a piece of music to consider or choose, I know if it has any more than 17, then I need to not consider it as an option. My colleague, Dr. Dockendorf, who conducts our symphonic band, I believe the capacity in that room is 20. I'd have to go back and check the floor plan again. So he has a little more flexibility with the instrumentation that he can use at that point. And I will also say that some of the pieces that I had originally planned for this semester, we just simply didn't have time to get them prepared. So I was expecting to prepare more pieces of music over the course of the semester. But because of that 2-week period where we went to online learning and we did some of these other activities, we stopped our in-person rehearsals. So we got a little bit behind in terms of what we were able to put together.
Okay, thank you for that. This next question is from Sierra. Thanks so much for doing this webinar, Dr. McKinney. It's great to see you again. Are there any strategies that you're using for flute players to reduce aerosol?
Yeah, thanks, Sierra. Thanks for the question. Yes, the answer to that. Yes. I guess what I would offer to that is, if you were to go back and review the webinar again, you will see 2 flute players in the first row of that video, and they are not able to play with the mask with the hole of the slit. It's just not possible to produce sound. So what they do is they keep the mask underneath the chin, and when they're done playing the instrument, they cover up during rests or during times when I'm talking to them as a group. Flute has been one of those instruments that we've had to kind of work around because of this hole with the slit or the hole doesn't make it possible to play the flute.
Okay, thank you for that. Next is a question from Karen, who asks, could you tell us more about the kind of encouragement you provide to students who may be feeling down and disengaged to help them stay engaged in music and feel hopeful for their future in music?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That is, I will say, I think for anybody that's been teaching this semester, that has been something I think I've tried to be more mindful of. A simple check-in and talking to a student as they enter the rehearsal space and saying hello to them and making sure that they engage with you just for that brief moment, I have tried to do to the extent possible. I have in my ensemble, I'll call it an ensemble, in the Wind Symphony, I have 65 students this semester that are registered for the class. And that contact piece of just me knowing their name and giving them that sense of purpose and just saying, how are you doing? Checking in with them as they enter and exit the room is my, I guess, ability to notice how they're doing as people. It's really challenging, I must tell you. If there's an awkward silence at the beginning and end of our rehearsals that is kind of, I've noticed more. Normally there's an energy that comes about when students come in to make music. There's excitement, and I sense a certain amount of anxiety that comes about. But I guess what I have tried to do most is remain calm, and that's challenging for anybody, but it's challenging during these times. But if I can remain calm and show that sense of confidence and presence to the students, I hope that they will give that back to me. But I guess to come back to the beginning of your question, one thing that I will offer is I just try to make sure that I engage with the students and say hello, ask them how they're doing. That little bit of connection, I hope, goes a long way.
Great, thank you. And then we have a question related to the marching band and then also performances. So Sandra says, it sounds like the marching band has recorded a performance to be played at the upcoming games. Do you see them being able to play live in any upcoming games? And then for these future performances, Are they pre-recorded? Are they virtual? Could you clarify that upcoming presentation December 7th, how that will look?
Yeah, I'll speak first to the marching band piece. And the marching band is not able to attend the game, and that is actually from the Pac-12. That comes down as a Pac-12 mandate, I believe. I'm going to double check on that, but it's a Pac-12 mandate that comes about that no athletic bands will be allowed into the stadium. So the recordings that I'm speaking about that the students have done these Friday evening rehearsals, as well as past performances, those will be put into the stadium, and I believe through social media as well as how those will be distributed. In regard to the December 7th streamed content that I mentioned, what we are doing right now with the Wind Symphony, Symphonic Band, and Concert Band, we are recording all of that music in S134 in our other rehearsal space with video and audio going at the same time. And then those will become captured content, what has become known in our land as captured content. We will put all of that captured content together, all of those pieces of music that we've been working on, and then with that will be streamed out. So it'll be live streamed, but not a live performance, because obviously we can't perform live for people. But just to give people a sense of what we've been up to this semester, we'll be doing that streamed performance of captured content on Monday, December 7th. Of all of our band ensembles.
Great, thank you so much for the clarity there. This next question may be outside of your purview, but we're getting it a couple of times, so I want to ask, most recently from Patricia, do you have any information you can share about how CU has handled choirs or singing?
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of insight, but then if you have any additional questions, I would ask you to follow up with Dr. Greg Gentry, who's the director of our choral studies. I can give you just a little bit of what I know. I believe that they've been rehearsing in octets, so in groups of 8 singers and the conductor. And then I believe that they're using masks to rehearse, but I would again ask you to clarify that with Professor Gentry. But they've been rehearsing in smaller groups. They are also required to do the 12 feet of distance that I've been mentioning throughout the course of the presentation. So there has to be 12 feet of distance between each singer in the choirs. But if you have any additional questions about that, Professor Greg Gentry is the director of choirs, and I'm sure he'd be happy to hear from you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. We are going to move into our final 2 to 3 questions here. We have a few more questions streaming in. The next question here is, could you tell us a little bit more about how the rehearsal works? How many times are students moving rooms throughout that rehearsal? And then you already answered my question about whether they need to clean equipment, as it sounds like they're bringing their own. But could you walk us through what that actually looks like, the schedule that you outlined, and if they're moving rooms or staying in the same room throughout that schedule?
Yeah, thanks for that. This is a longer, I'll try to give you the shortest response I can. What I do is I have a matrix essentially of every student in the ensemble, and I do part assignments. So I assign every student to a specific piece of music, and I need to be mindful that they're not playing on too many pieces, and I'm able to offer playing opportunities for the students to the extent possible. To answer your question about changing rooms, the only rooms that I have available to me are S134, the room I talked about, in Grusin Hall. So it's a possibility that a student could rehearse a piece in S134 during one of those 4 blocks, and then they do their ventilation for 15 minutes, and then they exit the room, and then after 15 minutes, they move to Grusin and rehearse a piece of music. Primarily this semester, a student has shown up to rehearse in S134 for their 30 minutes, and then they're pretty much done for the day because I need to rotate other students into the mix throughout the course of the rehearsal. To answer the question about sanitation of equipment and such, if a student does not feel comfortable sitting in the chair, there are sanitation stations in the room so they can grab a wipe and they can wipe down their chair if they choose to do so. But as Amanda just mentioned, stands, they bring their own stand into the room. I hope that answered the question. Amanda, did I get it there?
Yes, that was perfect. It was great. Thank you. And we're going to move into our final question. Before we do, just one piece of feedback. One of our attendees said, I wanted to share a profound thank you for this presentation and to the College of Music and Band faculty for their perseverance, resilience, creativity, and thoughtful approach in making the best of this very difficult situation. Thank you for caring.
Thank you.
And then our last question comes from Catherine. Thank you for this inspiring presentation. What a comfort to know the band's program is in such capable hands. I was a member of the CU marching band for 6 years. And my question is, do you get a sense that your ability to keep on in person is uncommon for schools of music across the country? It seems like this Aerosol study is key, great interdisciplinary work at CU.
Yes, is the question interdisciplinary? Is that what we're looking at?
The question is do you think it's uncommon that you're able to continue, practicing in person, or do you think that this is happening at other schools of music across the country? Catherine really feels like the strong interdisciplinary work with Dr. Shelley Miller has enabled this to continue.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for the clarification, Amanda. Yes, I would absolutely say that this cross-campus collaboration, without a doubt, has enabled us to do this. And other universities have decided to take a very different approach, and some programs across the country have not done an in-person offering, or an even more limited in-person offering. But I have to say that Dr. Shelley Miller's research and the other work of campus partners across the campus, Jose Jimenez has been really instrumental in our work. They have given that level of safety that you hear Jacob and Ariel speaking to in their statements. So other programs have gone in different directions, but since that research is done here on campus, and other programs are making their decisions based on research that is done on our campus, I feel that we are doing a really fine job of putting this into place. But other programs across the country have decided to do other things and not do in-person meetings. We have done fine. We have had no incidents of any COVID incidents in our rehearsals. So I think that speaks to the work and the collaboration and the unity of thought between Dr. Miller's research and what we've been able to do in the College of Music.
Great, thank you. That's very clear. As Don mentioned, I do want to mention as well that Dr. Miller and actually Dr. Jimenez, who Don just referenced, have both participated in this webinar series. So please feel free to go to our webinar website and take a look at their webinars. In the meantime, thank you so much to everyone for joining us for today's presentation, and a special thank you again to Don for this great information. At this time, we invite you to provide your feedback on the webinar by answering the following poll question. On a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this webinar to a friend or other CU Boulder alumni? We thank you in advance for submitting your feedback. As a reminder, all webinar attendees will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording of this presentation as well as a survey. To view upcoming webinars as well as previous recordings, please visit our website at colorado.edu/business/alumni. We hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is next Friday, as Associate Professor in the Department of Applied Mathematics, Dr. David Bortz, presents on COVID-19 in the state of Colorado, models, warnings, and protecting our neighbors. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for your time. And as always, go Buffs.